seriously. Um, and it depends how you look at those aspects in particular. So let me just talk about the conventional understanding of violence. So the conventional understanding of violence, we all know what violence is, or we're supposed to know what violence is when we see it. So violence is directly visible. It's performed by an agent that you can immediately identify. And so things like religious terrorism, international conflicts, and civil unrest are, some of the key things that are identified. And so this is coming out of partly out of Zizek and partly out of Walter Benjamin's critiques of violence, that what we see is a subjective violence, which becomes the conventional idea of representations of violence. And what I want to do is to draw upon the work of people like Walter Benjamin and Slavoj Zizek and others, but particularly Gilles Deleuze, to provide a more critical approach to violence. And that critical approach involves making visible that an invisible mode of violence, which is to do with representation, the language that we use to talk about violence, and of course, the frame within which we represent, which is historical time, secular historical time. As talking specifically in relation to the work of Zizek, what we have to do is to shift our perspective back onto our modes of representation to bring into view two hidden forms of violence. So we already see subjective, visible violence, and what we have to do is to make visible an invisible violence, which is actually the objective violence, which becomes systemic particularly in all forms of the state. And the one that I'm going to focus on, which is part of the objective violence, is the idea of symbolic violence, which is to do with language, our thought patterns, and how they become complete.